Okay, awesome. All right, so welcome today to Adults English. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask, or if you have a comment or any advice that you would like to share in the session today, please do share. Any advice is valued in the session. Or if you would like, please send me a message on Skype and I can add anything else to our sessions in the future. All right, please do ensure that you do attend or see the recordings for the next session next week. We'll be talking about accuracy versus fluency again, as well as interview English. And we'll also be touching more on business English as well. We're going to touch briefly on business English and also on daily talk today. All right, so let's go ahead with business English. So these are just a couple of pointers. All right, but this lesson or this session rather is going to be 80% on daily talk as well as free talk. 20% of it is going to be on business English. Next week's lesson will be broadly around interview and business English. All right. So let's go ahead with some tips and tricks on business English. All right, so let's get started. So there are two categories for business English. There's functional language and there is the vocabulary side. All right, so functional language is the study and practice of the language that's needed to conduct business functions, just meetings, presentations, negotiations in English. So the basics, all right, and these can be easily taught and we don't need extended knowledge on these areas of business English. But when we come to the vocabulary or the terminology rather for business English, this is where we might need to do a bit more Googling, a bit more research, especially with regards to our market team leader PDFs, our textbooks that are more advanced in our business English. So we really need to ensure, because this is so specialized, it's law, it's finance, it's medical. So we really, really need to ensure that when we get our terminology correct before, we need to make sure that we prepare in advance for business English, because the terminology isn't something that is common knowledge, right? So to teach business English, you need to study the language of business, which is further specialized by the industry, right? So for your business lessons, so we need to give a couple of tips, right? So we need to ensure, what do your students really want? So we need to maybe, if we are meeting a student for the first time and their target is business English, we need to maybe spend 5 to 10 minutes chatting with them about their language goals in business English. Why do we do this? If they've already chosen material prior to the lesson, maybe they've chosen the business communications or the market team leader PDF or something like that, just ensure, because 9 times out of 10, they've just chosen something business related, but then you'll find that it's nothing relevant to what they are actually studying or what they are actually doing in their work. And we want to get something that pertains to their jobs and what they need to actually do or learn within their careers. Right? So do they want to learn more about emails, how to construct an email? We need to do a needs analysis for this. Do they want to learn more on how to present in a meeting, the correct vocabulary for their industry? Do they want to learn more about how to handle themselves well on a call? Are they into sales, right? So what is the terminology for sales? Things like that, right? And so on. So we need to ensure what needs they have and how we're going to meet that objective for them. Like I say, it's all good and well choosing material that's business related, but most of the material doesn't pertain to their careers. So we need to find something that pertains to their specific career so that they can start using that vocabulary from day one within their field, right? So they can see those, the product of their work straight away, and they'll keep coming back to your lessons and they'll see the value in those lessons, right? And it will just make your life a whole lot easier as well, right? Also get a clear idea of the context in which the learners use the English, right? So also within business, business is usually conducted on a global scale. So there's a strong possibility that most of your students are communicating with other non-native speakers. So this is going to be a good idea to find more resources for cross-cultural communication as well. So there's a lot of good resources out there on cross-communication that really, really helps. And I think you'll find that some of your students struggle to understand their, their meetings. They have like some of team members that have strong accents, coming from other countries or something like that, or jargon that they don't understand. So that also will help. There's methods or the resources that you can find to aid them. All right. Also, again, it's a business lesson, yes. So we are formal. There is a certain kind of student that comes into business lessons, usually a college student preparing for interviews, or they are business orientated people, professionals who would like to gain more knowledge in their field and conduct themselves professionally, and be more articulate in their field, something like that. But the energy still has to remain high. You still have to be enthusiastic in this class. So ensure that you still keep your students engaged. Talk time still needs to be quite high. You'll find that most of the material that is available for your students on this platform, as well as a lot out there, do have a lot of exercises like fill in the gaps, your word link kind of thing. But just ensure that your students do get that talk time, right? They're not just reading from the textbook as well. There's a lot of reading and a lot of article reading. Make sure that you are still pulling out phrases from those articles and discussing them, asking them extended questions like you would in a daily talk lesson, getting their opinions, still exercising that target vocabulary, right? It's really, really important to still keep them engaged, because they can also just read that vocabulary and listen to for pronunciation through an app. So they need someone to keep them engaged and keep coming back to the lessons. All right. So also choose material carefully. Like I said in the beginning of the first two slides, you'll find that your students, if they are choosing business English, do in fact already have material in mind. However, just make sure that that material pertains to their field, pertains to their goals, and it's also pertaining to authentic situations that they're going to encounter. All right. If they're an engineer, why are we talking about sales? If they're a technician, why are we, doing the marketing PDF? This kind of thing. So we just got to make sure that it's kind of pertaining to their specific field and the terminology is on point for them. Keep them happy. And we don't want to push anything on them. We just want to make them feel like we've put in effort to find the correct material for them as well, right? Let's go move on to the daily talk as well as the free talk, right? Please let me know if there are any questions or anything you would like to say as well. Anytime is perfect, right? So these are the principles of adult learning. So as I'm sure you both know, that with adults, they also would like to be responsible for their own decisions. It's not like kids where, they want somebody to lead their way and parents want them to lead the way. Like any adults, they like to make their own decisions. So they want to be capable of self-direction. And I think within the lessons, you want to give them that option, right? So they want to be in direction of their own lessons. Okay, so we want to again find out our students' language goals within daily talk and free talk. So even though these lessons tend to be a little bit more relaxed, especially free talk without the textbook, we still definitely want to give them educational value. We still want to correct, even though the corrections may be a bit more gentle. Please note that there is a recording available or it will be available quite soon for fluency versus accuracy in correction, and how to gently correct for free talk lessons, so on. And also find out your students' interest to select topics that engage them, right? So this is going to come with time, but it's also something you can do to assess them when you first meet them, by having a list of questions, as I'm sure you both do already, have a list of questions that kind of get to know your student from the get-go and assess their goals as well as their interests. You know, if you have a student that seems very, very interested in kind of the deeper side of things, then we're not going to give them lessons pertaining to diets and exercise and, you know, all those superficial kinds of things. We're going to head more to, you know, life and destiny, you know, stress, these kinds of lessons that are conducive to maybe a bit more authentic conversation. And some of the students really, really appreciate that authentic conversation way more than those superficial conversations. I think as language learners, their whole lives, you know, those are the general topics that they do hear very often. Those exercise lessons, those health lessons, you know, all those hobby lessons. So bear that in mind when you do your material selections, that they really do like the deeper topics, especially, of course, your advanced students. Right, and then you definitely want to create an atmosphere that allows your student to feel welcome in their class. So every time a new student is passing through your classroom, it's becoming their own classroom. So ensure that you are friendly, you're welcoming. I think that goes without saying. So just create an atmosphere that is customized for them, all right? So basing your energy off of their energy, they're giving you a high energy, you can return that, reciprocate that as well. All right, and also, of course, we are facilitator, we are guiding rather than telling. We are leading the horse to water, we aren't making it drink. All right, let's go ahead with the next one here. Okay, the second principle of adult learning. So adult learners have a variety of life experiences, which are their greatest or their richest resources for learning. Okay, so as you know, that adults, even college students, they have so many experiences and life experiences that you can use to your advantage in the classroom, using your extended questions and expansion on questions to create conversation, authentic conversation. And this in contrast with the traditional way of teaching, where you rely heavily on your teacher's knowledge, you're actually relying heavily on your students' knowledge rather, right? Okay, so what keeps these students coming back? Okay, so there are two main reasons your students will stick with you. Okay, so number one, they feel confident and they feel relaxed in your class and they really enjoy the environment. So they don't have to be here. So I think that's also a main difference between the kids and the adults, is that for your kids, of course, they have to be there. The parents, of course, are paying for the lessons, they have to go. But with your adults, they can choose any teacher they like, any platform that they like. So it's really up to you whether or not they stay or go. Yes, of course, you can't be everybody's cup of tea, but you can almost be everyone's cup of tea with all these tips and tricks, with enthusiasm, showing interest not only in the topic, but as well as the students, remembering tiny details about those students, being creative within your lessons, not the humdrum, you know, number one, number two, number three, number four, question number five, you know, this kind of thing. Also with your body language, I cannot stress enough. I say this in every training because it's just so, so important. Leaning forward when your student is addressing you can make a world of a difference. Not looking at your phone when you get a notification, not minimizing the screen when you get a notification on your laptop or PC, not shuffling around things. It seems very silly, but those things do add up and your students do notice when you do those things. And especially for your newer learners that are still deciding whether or not they want to stick with you, first impressions are everything. So just ensure that you have a big smile and you are very warm, and effort is everything to them in the beginning, all the way through. All right, and you're able to broaden your topics, right? So this is all falling under the same category of them feeling confident and relaxed in your class, right? You're showing that effort, you're able to broaden those topics, and also you're staying neutral within the class. So why do they feel so confident in your class? Why do they feel so relaxed? Because with daily talk, especially with daily talk, you'll find that some of your topics are quite heavy, and they are requiring your students to give their opinion, very opinion-based questions. And most of the time, maybe we don't like the answer, we don't like the opinion, but that's not for us to really, really weigh in on. We need to remain neutral within the class. All right, so we need to make them feel not judged for their opinion. We need to validate their opinion, whatever it is. And we need to give them educational value within their class as well. Make them feel heard as well. All right, so when they are delivering a very heavy opinion or something that is, taking a lot of guts to say, make sure that you are validating it and making them feel trusted and making them feel heard in that class. And also being professional, right? So with this, the opinion-based questions, they do become quite personal, some of the questions. It's just the way it is, especially if you get to know your students very well and they keep coming back to your class. Do just remind yourself to remain professional in class. Of course, I think we all ignite a connection with our students. Just remain professional as you can. And I think that goes hand in hand with being neutral as well, right? And your number 2, you allow them to reach their language goals. So not only are you building that really important rapport with your students, but you're also allowing them to reach their language goals that you guys assessed in the beginning of the very beginning. And you continually keep on revisiting those language goals. Are we still, she wanted to focus on her listening skills. Are we meeting those requirements? She wanted to focus on her speaking time. Is her speaking time high enough? Is she getting enough practice? So keep on revisiting those goals as often as you can, especially if it's a student that you see every day. Right. So what keeps them coming back again? It's also your class is age appropriate. All right. So I think this also goes without saying. When we validate, we are making sure that your validation is age appropriate. We're not super pumped up like we would be in a kid's class. We are treating them with respect. We are treating them as an adult because that's exactly what they are. All right. And we're also correcting gently with purpose and clarity. All right. So again, we're not in a condescending way. Again, please do watch the recording for correction, a gentle correction. It is definitely worth a watch. You give your students space and let the silence hang, but you know when to prompt. So it's not awkward, right? So I think we both know the difference between when there's an awkward silence and when we're waiting for a response, and you know that there is going to be one. But we don't want to make the students feel as if they're under pressure or on the spot in any way. So just be mindful of that, and just ensure you can tell the difference between that when there's that uncomfortable pause. And if there is that, make sure that you can answer your own question to do modeling. So make sure that you can model for your students if they do battle. If you ask them a question or extended question, maybe they didn't quite catch, or maybe they need an example, make sure you can just answer your own question, right? So what stresses you out? Oh, what really stresses me out is, waking up really early. What about you? All right. So giving that modeling answer for them and then bouncing it back to them. All right. Again, you provide your students with educational value. You are familiar with your phonetics. This is something, your phonics and your phonetic spelling. And I think that's really important, especially within your reading lessons. So giving them pronunciation value as well, I think is very important. Doesn't have to always be necessary, but they do like to write it down, especially if they're recording the lesson. I think it's really, really nice for them as well. Right, let's go ahead to, I don't think we have time for all of these slides, but let's talk a little bit about limit unnecessary disclaimers in your introductions. So this is quite common. So I found that this happens a lot with older teachers. I don't mean older in age. I mean teachers that have been working as teachers for quite a long time. Why do we do this? Why do we give unnecessary disclaimers in class? Because we want our students to feel comfortable. So we tend to over explain in the beginning. We say, oh, please, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask. If I'm speaking too fast, you just let me know. Sometimes I do speak too fast, and we go on this whole thing. And next thing you know, we've spent 5 minutes of an introduction that could have been spent igniting a connection or building a rapport with your students. Okay, so yes, we do want to make them feel comfortable and at ease in the classroom. But what actually ensures that comfortability and what actually ensures the ease of the classroom is going to actually be these things below. All right, so we open our class with a warm welcome and we get to know our students. We assess their level. So we should be assessing their level anyway. So this is how we assess our pace in the beginning, as I'm sure you know. We assess our pace. We don't have to say, am I speaking too fast? Am I speaking too slow? In the beginning, hi, how are you? What do you do for work? Are you studying at the moment? We will know right from the beginning, okay, I'm going to have to slow it down for this one, or I can speak at this pace. They're quite advanced, all right? Those opening questions should be enough for you to assess their level. And you should be speaking at a baseline in the beginning of your lessons anyway. All right, and look out for mispronounced vocabulary. So that's another thing that can also assess their level, or not only assess their level, but then you'll know that they're not understanding the vocabulary, and there your CCQs can come into play. You can concept check, and you can also expand. You don't have to say, make a sentence for me with that. You can actually expand on the conversation, or you can use that new vocabulary word in a discussion question, furthering engaging in conversation with your student and stimulating your student and broadening the conversation makes for a much more exciting lesson as well. Right? Nurture interest and clarify confusion. So if your student, you can see that your student is particularly interested in a certain line, or is particularly interested in a topic in the lesson, there's no need to rush. I think a lot of the time we feel a need to finish lessons, especially if they're short ones. We feel a need to finish the material. There's absolutely no reason to finish the material. As long as the student is getting enough talk time, enough educational value, there's no reason that we need to finish the material unless the student has specifically asked to finish the material in a specific time frame. But the nurture the interest, then talk about that one question for 25 minutes, if that's what it's going to take to get them to talk. All right, and then use that time on building a connection with your student. All right, and then let's move on to breaking the reading down into phrases. All right, so this is something I think a lot of teachers already do, but it is quite nice to remind. So this is quite a short reading, but if you would like, getting your students to read this, and then instead of just immediately going to your discussion questions on the next page or your comprehension questions on the next page, we can break down this reading, because again, this is going to ensure the comprehension. It's going to ensure the vocabulary comprehension as well, and it's going to extend your vocabulary. So it's going to help them play with that vocabulary. It's going to help them activate that vocabulary. And it's a lot more fun, because it's also eliciting the opinion without sticking to that number one, number two, number three. So you can select a phrase here to pull out and discuss. All right, some of us are satisfied with our current status. What about you? Are you satisfied with your current status right now? Or what would you like to achieve in your life? What is your opinion about this? Do you think everyone in your family, or, you can X, Y, and Z, we can build on there, pull out phrases and concept check from there. All right. Okay. Let's move on to the last slide I think we have time for, which is just going to be a couple of reminders here. All right. So just again, to be conscious of your body language, like I said in the beginning, all right, just ensure that you are leaning forward. Be conscious of your background. I just have a blank background, but I think it just depends on who you're teaching. If you've got kiddies a lot, then of course you're going to have a much more vivid and colorful background, of course, with stickers and everything like that. And that's really cool. It's really just make sure it's not messy. I think that's a big one. No laundry in the background. I'm sure we all know that. Appear present. I think that's a really big one. Appearing present, being interested, and avoiding looking elsewhere in the lesson, right? Customizing your lessons to your students' interests and goals and limits. All right. So also, I think the more you get to know your students, you'll also find that they have limits of what they don't want to talk about, what they dislike. And that will also keep them coming back, because then you'll also be able to navigate, so-and-so does not like when I talk about this, or they don't like this topic, or let's stay away from this because they don't like X, Y, and Z. And I think that comes with, when you have a student that you've taught for a really long time. All right. And also remembering your CCQs. So not always sticking strictly to the material, but also doing a bit of freestyle to ensure your CCQs are not only there to check concepts, but they're also there to extend, and they're there to engage your learners. Right. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please do stay behind. If you don't, or maybe you do a bit later on, if you want any more information, here's my Skype ID in the chat. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for attending. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Can I? Okay, I think this is one situation that I actually experienced before.
Yeah.
We have a rule with regards topics or matters that we should not discuss into class, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like politics, money. But then I actually had this regular student, which I think he loves politics. So although although we have a book, we have a material, but then the moment that we go at the middle of the class, he would interrupt me, or he would just tell something with politics, and that would be the whole talk until the end. So I'm afraid, since I'm aware that this is something that we should not talk about, I'm trying to divert it. I'm trying to get his attention towards the other lessons, but he really likes politics. The thing is,
Yeah.
how? I mean to say, what
Okay.
is the best way to talk about politics, which is not really that offending, which is not really objective at all?
I think in that case, because I also have quite a few students, particularly male students actually, that really love politics. And unfortunately, I know there are those guidelines that do steer away from politics. Unfortunately, it is unavoidable. And I think, unfortunately, I think what you'll have to do in that case is let him guide the conversation. So I think what they're very worried about is that they are going to get offended, and they are going to report you, and they are going to say something, or you're going to say something that offends the student, and then they are going to get in trouble. So I think with this, the way that you can avoid that is by allowing him to guide the conversation. So yes, we are the facilitators, but then allowing him to asking his opinion entirely. And if he would like to strike up conversation about politics, then allowing him to guide the conversation entirely. And if there is a way that maybe, what kind of, if you don't mind me asking, like, can you give me an example? Is it politics about China? Is it world politics? Like, Where's he going usually with the politics?
But actually, it's all about the Chinese politics, all about their government.
Okay, yeah, that's a favorite, isn't it? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think it's really hard to divert because you don't want to offend them as well. I would honestly say just keep on asking for his opinion and do divert when you can, of course. I think do divert when you can.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, do divert when you can. But if he's stuck on the ground about it, then just ask his opinion about like maybe there's something similar you can ask about because it says don't ask within Chinese territory. So maybe we could steer it. Maybe you can compare a situation in another country and maybe steer it to another country, perhaps. And you could talk about something a little bit less close to him. Maybe it would work for a little bit, but I think for long term, just let him guide the conversations. I think that's the only way I could see that going. Um, oh, oh, sorry about that. Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Sure. Or
Yes, so
Got a call. Sorry about
oh,
that.
there.
Yeah, Peter,
Yeah,
do
no
you have
worries.
that situation?
yes, in fact, there is a, but fortunately, I don't know how Mao stands with politics. I'm standing real well with the politics, but I know for, let's say, when we're talking about China, the Asian countries are particularly sensitive about this, especially China. You know, there is a tons of things you can say. I could start from Mao
Yeah.
history until now, but you have to find a way, somehow to get out from this situation. I remember when I worked for another company, it was also a business platform, and I mostly work with Japanese professionals.
Oh,
And I remember one student of mine, his grandfather was a soldier in Second World War
oh
on the
wow.
Japanese side. And he was really, sharp to Americans. He was like a Japanese nationalist, like he couldn't forget how they bombed his country. And but it was interesting for me. I get out with this because I know some famous Japanese commanders from the
Oh
Second World War,
wow.
like some admirals or something. So when you mention that, these people are somehow, they are getting full of pride, and then start talking. And this is a good way. You can stand aside, let him or her speak. The time is, ticking slowly or quickly, depends on
Yeah.
the aspect. But it's really good to have some crucial, or how should I say, some essential knowledge about something, because if you don't know much, maybe it will, how should I say, you can stuck in some kind of situation that can be, and I understand Mao completely, but I don't know, maybe you should try to find something that maybe you can stick to, try to be neutral as much as you. I don't, don't have any obstacles or any, I don't know, taboos to talk about politics, but not all the people are the same. You can tell me anything, but you cannot speak to others so openly. Like you said, maybe someone might feel offended or something. I don't know. Knowledge, knowledge about any topic is, I think, essential, especially for us teachers. So I must
Yeah.
say I'm proud to my knowledge.
Yeah,
It
I
is
think
paying out now, to reading so much books or watching so much TV shows or I don't know, movies and everything. So I can say I'm well informed about things. So maybe this is the way, somehow to
Yeah.
expand your knowledge, your
Expand the
horizons.
knowledge. Yeah, I think that's actually true. Like perhaps actually knowing the weapon is more knowledge, because the less you know, the more likely you are to offend. I think yeah, I think that's really good advice too. I think allowing him to be the leader in the conversation, because
Yes,
then he's less
yes.
likely, you less likely to say something to offend. But also, if you are required to reply or required to give any kind of information,